And welcome back, everyone, to another edition of Going for Two, presented by our friends at Home Field Apparel. I am your host, the publisher of the Extra Points newsletter, Matt Brown. I'm joined here by my D1 Ticker colleague and co-host, Bryan Fischer. I hope all of you have had a meaningful and restful and wonderful holiday season. I'm going to peel back the curtain here a little bit. We're recording this before Christmas because Bryan and I want to be able to have some time to do Christmas with our families. But there's something else that's a little bit less time sensitive that we're able to record it now that I thought would be especially apropos for us to talk about, because now that Christmas is in the rear view, we are heading towards turning the calendar to 2023, and that means, Bryan, we have to make some predictions or else we lose our reporter license, right?
It does feel that way. This is that time of the year where you kind of reflect back upon everything you accomplished in 2022, all those big misses in terms of those predictions that we have. But it also offers a great slate of opportunities to also look ahead and peer into that crystal ball a little bit for 2023.
There will be a full text version of this on Extra Points. And before we kind of dig into what we're expecting for next year, I thought, in the interest of being fair, in the interest of being serious professional journalists, we should go back and look at what I wrote last December. I've been doing these predictions for as long as we've been doing Extra Points. I thought it's not a bad idea for it to take a second here, look back at what I thought was going to happen this year and see what sort of things we got right and what sort of things we badly missed on. So I have this pulled up, and I'll share the link to the 2022 predictions in the show notes. It didn't really get on any gigantic limbs. The first section pertained name, image, and likeness. And I thought, hey, this year we're going to see some major lawsuits. We're going to see somebody not get paid what they thought they were going to get paid. I thought that there was going to be some sort of conflict between brand and athlete. And Bryan, to the best of my knowledge, that hasn't actually happened yet. There's been a lot of rumors. There's been smoke. There's been frustration with people maybe not getting exactly what they thought. But I'm unaware of any litigation.
Yet. I think that's the key term, and I think I agreed with you. If we go back to some of those predictions, I mean that did seem like that was going to be the case. Not only was NIL kind of reaching a bit more of a mature phase, but you could understand how maybe some recruits didn't get what they promised. Maybe they didn't hold up their end of the bargain. We all know how. People enjoy their billable hours in college athletics, so maybe that was going to be a part of the case as well. So I think at the end of the day, there was some good reasoning behind that prediction. I don't know if you might want to roll that over to 2023. That might be a little bit more of a smart thing there.
Yeah, I'm not willing to say that that's not going to happen. I might have been a little bit premature with that one. A little bit potentially premature with a couple of these other things, right? I also believed, last December, hey, with the college football video games slated to come out in 2023, 2022 would be when the group license structure would be announced. And that has taken longer for all parties than was originally expected. That was also a pretty educated guess. I wasn't pulling that completely out of my butt. Part of the legal challenges with one team partners and with Fanatics and with Learfield and everything made that a little bit more challenging. You did see a proliferation in group licensing deals and even more recently with collectives with mid-majors. One team partners, has kind of gone out of their way to chase mid-major group license business. You can buy an App State jersey with a player name on it now.
As we were going through signing day, last week, it was fun to kind of go through a couple of rosters and noticing how schools are incorporating some of those NIL deals, whether it be on their official player pages, online where you can include a link to buy some of those jerseys. That has been one thing that I have noticed, especially I think during football season. Schools are making a huge push in terms of putting that out there, and I think that was one that you definitely nailed going into 2022.
Speaking of NIL, I mean, the last kind of prediction, which I think dovetails into the next group here, was about politics. And, based on what I was hearing at the end of last year, I thought, boy, wouldn't be shocked if the IRS makes itself known on the NIL front in 2022, either on the individual athletes failing to report deals or investigating charitable NIL collectives. And I believe, just like I did last year, that the great majority of those collectives that are classified as 501c3s and are promoting themselves as purely charitable, I don't think they actually meet the NIL, the IRS designation as such. This was another thing where I think I got out a little bit too early, because the IRS does not have the investigative capacity to do a bunch of the stuff it's supposed to be doing right now, let alone this. And so, and now I think it's an open question about whether that ever actually happens, even if these things really do break that law. So I thought we were going to see more of that. We didn't. Might see some more on the athlete side after this April, now that more people are doing deals, but we shall see. That one, it was a bit of a swing and a miss. Did a little bit better on some of the political predictions for 2022. I wrote that I did not think it would be possible for the federal government to pass an NIL bill. Didn't happen. Didn't really even
come close. Yeah.
Nothing got out of committee. Nothing really. And there were like 8 or 9 bills that were eventually proposed. None of them had any kind of meaningful juice. Ones come from Republicans or Democrats. This has become the conventional wisdom. I'm going to, spoiler alert here, I don't think that conventional wisdom completely applies for 2023. We can talk about why there in a second, but that January said this isn't happening. We had a couple of committee hearings about it. Didn't come close to happening. You also saw a run of state governments, primarily in the South, but not exclusively, immediately amend their state NIL bills to become more permissive or remove them entirely. Predicted that did end up happening. And I want to say at this point, I think only 1 or 2 states that didn't have an NIL bill got around to passing one. That there was a rush of that. That's not really a state house priority here at the moment. If I can take a victory lap, looking at the paragraph here too, I wrote, and quote, "The federal body that school leaders are most concerned with right now should not be the House or the Senate, but the National Labor Relations Board, one that has essentially invited athletes to unionize. I don't think we'll see an FBS program seriously attempt unionization in 2022, although I'm sure it will happen eventually." Folks, that kind of that happened just a couple of days ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
And
we're going to see.
I think that's one of the big predictions that we could probably go into a little bit later, just in terms of the outcome, not only of the NLRB case, but this is going to be, I think, one of the ones that everybody is really paying attention to and watching. Yes, you do have the House and the Johnson cases. We've discussed those before, and those are just kind of lurking in the background. I think this one's much more public, just in terms of the speed that you're going to see a decision reached, and probably some appeals as well, knowing how both these things tend to get fought out. But you're spot on with that one. That one was an easy one, I guess you could say, just given the talk, certainly when you made this prediction going into the year.
I will say this: while the NLRB straight up invited people to file complaints and to reach out, current athletes by and large didn't. The complaints came through activist groups on the outside, and that's ultimately what led to the investigation that's going to happen here surrounding not just USC, but the NCAA at large. No longer a hypothetical thing that may happen at some indeterminate point in the future. This is a major 2023 storyline. Let's talk about some stuff I totally screwed up. Let's talk about some of these realignment predictions. Again, these were things coming from I wrote this in January of 2021. All right. So, hey, I think the driving force between realignment in this cycle is going to continue to be FCS and 1AAA schools trying to become more geographically concentrated and, to better equip themselves for the FCS playoff. There was some of that, but that wasn't the driving force of realignment in 2022. It was the exact opposite. Did I see USC and UCLA coming? Not a chance. I was completely flat-footed when that news happened.
You were not the only one, so no. Don't worry about it. I think that took the entire industry outside of a very select few in Los Angeles and in the Big Ten offices by surprise.
And depending on who you believe, apparently one Minnesota blogger. Everybody else, didn't see it coming. I predicted that Chicago State would accept a provisional invitation to join the MEAC. The MEAC did in fact vote on admitting Chicago State, and they declined to do it. So now the Cougars are still institutionally homeless. So I think we'll see at least 2 new Division II programs announced are reclassifying to D1, and perhaps as many as 5. We think we hit at least 2.
I want to say we're Probably
Queens,
3 or 4, right?
yeah, Queens did, and Stonehill did, and
Was
I
it
don't remember.
Abilene Christian or something like that?
No,
Or not
you're
Abilene
thinking
Christian,
of Commerce.
Commerce, that's it, yeah.
I think Commerce was in 2020. I think that was in 2021. Was when they announced it.
You can
There's a
tell we
couple.
did plenty of research for this episode.
Yeah. Okay. So partial credit on this one.
Yeah,
I know,
yeah, yeah.
right? Serious professionals. I said that the most interesting mid-major at this point was UT Arlington, because at this point they were in conversations to join not just the WAC, but potentially the Missouri Valley Conference, which seems like a geographic outlier. They gave final presentations. Like, there was a lot of smoke to that. They ended up joining the WAC. My educated guess for the most interesting mid-major with multiple realignment options this year is the College of Charleston. They're still in the CAA. I don't think that things got especially far with them looking at other ones. So I'll take the L on that one. This is a guess, is that once Conference USA will add Eastern Kentucky to get to 10 programs. No, they added Kennesaw State.
I would not put the well, maybe we'll get to that in the prediction.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure Eastern Kentucky. You might want to roll something over at least on that school to 2023.
We'll talk about that too. And I got a couple other things wrong, and then we can hit into some of the big things here. For the Big Ten media rights deal, I predicted that was going to. I did get it right that I wasn't going to do it with ESPN. I said it would be. I said Fox, CBS, and I didn't have NBC, but
you had an NCAA badly wants back into
yes.
college. So I think that would qualify for NBC, because they badly wanted into college football beyond Notre Dame.
They did. I was definitely wrong on the money. I predicted something in the high 60s range, and that it's going to be more than that. On that front, said that there's going to be some NIL industry contraction and consolidation in the marketplace front. That hasn't happened. It is going to happen very soon. I'm aware of one that's probably not going to make it to Q3, but a little bit early on that one. And do you feel confident predicting the next NCAA Constitution will be accepted with minimal complaint next month? That is true, in part because the Constitution barely said anything. Like, we're still fighting over anything actually substantive, and the fact that has taken so long is,
Well, we were also in that room there in Indianapolis when that was all going down, and there was some pushback amongst the D2, D3 type of members. There were a couple that raised their objections, but not percentage wise. Most of them voted for it. So
yeah, I do remember multiple ones calling on the legacy of Dr. King as a means to make sure we didn't pass the new Constitution, which, far be it from me, somebody who has not been blessed with an overwhelming supply of melanin, but that feels like a stretch. Looking back here, obviously, I think these predictions hit a couple of major stories here in 2022. We didn't hit all of them as we head into the things we want to take a stab at predicting. One of the biggest, if not the biggest story, I think, from last year was USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten. That's a huge story, not just because it set the conference realignment cycle going on again. It sparked questions about what super conferences are. It completely blew up the idea of trying to contain costs via moving to something in tighter geography, which was kind of the assumption in and around COVID and what we've seen here with lower leagues. And it's a competition story. It's an NIL story. It's a political story. And it's a philosophical story that, I feel like, once that happened in the late summer, really kind of cast a shadow on a bunch of other things happening here. You didn't see this coming, right?
I think just the completion of it, like, when it happened and how quickly it happened. Usually you get some sort of rumors, and I do kind of think back to a couple of conversations that I had, earlier that summer or in that spring, and I said, what, maybe I should have put 2 and 2 together, just a little bit, in terms of, hey, maybe this is a move that, USC primarily, but I think UCLA obviously still, very much wanted to make the move as well. And I think it caught everybody's surprise. I mean, we were there, in Las Vegas at NACTA, and there was a lot of discussions about Oklahoma and Texas, that was kind of the big move. Is there anything that's going to happen? And then as soon as we get back home, really, it was kind of like the next day. Then boom, he heard the rumors. He saw, John Wilders was first to report, and then it happened. It happened very, very
6
quickly.
hours later, basically. Yeah,
and really the biggest surprise to me was just knowing that Kevin Warren, the commissioner, was overseas at the time. I was like, well, they're not going to complete anything without the commissioner being fully on board. And as we, he kind of has recounted at least a little bit over the last couple of months, able to get that job done, get some phone calls, get some Zooms done. But it was seismic to say the least. And I think the one that, just because of the geography component, really caught everybody off guard. I think everybody could understand, Texas and Oklahoma. Yeah, sure. They always had wanted to be in that prestigious league, the most prestigious league. Obviously the money was great, but at the end of the day, this is a new era, certainly a conference that stretches from coast to coast, and one that has the top 3 media markets in the country. So
top 4. Philadelphia is number 4.
Sure. Yeah. I guess you would definitely include them, given the Penn State tie. So, obviously a ton of media eyeballs on the Big Ten. You have the new TV deal that will expose them even more to broadcast television and really pump them up. We were just at the SBJ convention a couple weeks ago. Had my Fox colleague Michael Mulvihill just talking about how the amount of eyeballs that those TV partners would have if they ran a Big Ten promo on Sunday, and teasing the games for the next week, and just how big that can be for promoting the brand. You add in some marquee flagship programs like UCLA basketball and USC football, to the mix. And this is there's a reason why we have started to say there's the big 2 in college athletics at the FBS level, and then kind of everybody else. It's no longer the Power 5; it really is the Power 2. And this move really solidified that, I think, over the summer.
Beyond that, it's interesting. Obviously, the Big 2 dominate money. They dominate administrative power. They dominate recruiting. They dominate many of these other things. Maybe one of the other biggest stories, though, was, I think, from that calendar year, was the exact opposite of the Big 2. And that was with the miracle run of St. Peter's, making it to the Elite 8. This feels like approximately 400 years ago. The idea that a tiny school would make a run like this, not shocking. It happens every couple of years. It wasn't, Loyola made the Final Four. It wasn't that big of a deal. But I thought with St. Peter's, it's especially funny, one, because their mascot's a peacock, and that's like objectively hilarious.
I have a home field shirt.
You have the home field shirt. Yeah. A lot of people do. But this was happening right as conversations around I think readjusting Division I were the loudest, because it was only a couple of weeks really after the NCAA convention. And if you were going to move a dozen teams out of Division I that were not HBCUs because they were not capable of funding a Division I level experience, because their budgets were too small, their facilities weren't strong enough, St. Peter's would be on that list. If you were going to get rid of 6 schools, St. Peter's would be pretty close to that list. Like there's mid-major, there's low major, and there's Don Bosco High School, and there's St. Peter's. So the idea for that school, and then that school to beat Kentucky basketball with the guy that looked like, had a McLovin mustache looking thing, right? And then with the whole thing, really kind of, McLovin doesn't have a mustache, but like it looks like a 7th grader who hasn't figured out how to shave yet, kind of thing. And then they make the Elite 8. Is hilarious. Like that crystallizes why mainstream America is so interested in the NCAA basketball tournament. Not because they're deeply invested in the sport like they are for college football. They're really not. But they're invested in a story like a St. Peter's. And if you dramatically change Division I's membership, this is a risk that you run of potentially not having a team exactly like that moving forward. A huge story. And then, I'm trying to think of the other really, really big things here. I mean, like on the football field, I guess Georgia's the new Alabama, kind of.
A little bit. I mean, just slaying that kind of Alabama dragon that was kind of, hovering over the rest of the SEC and that program in particular, knocking off, Nick Saban. We'd always heard going into last year in particular about Nick Saban and all the assistants, none of them can beat him. Well, two ended up beating him last year, and Jimbo Fisher and Kirby Smart, and the third national title for Georgia, a program that we always thought was right there among the most attractive jobs in the country, just had never really gotten it done. Yeah, they've won 2 previous national titles, but given the recruiting base, given the talent that they have on hand pretty much every single year, given the facilities there, you kind of thought them to be a school that was capable of winning a couple national titles, and maybe they will now that they kind of broke through that glass ceiling, and they got things rolling. They not only have the number 1 team in the college football playoff this year, but one that looks primed to compete for the next couple of years and really kind of turn into not discounting Alabama, but maybe Alabama's very easternly compatriot there in terms of dominating the national discussion.
I've seen a lot of analysts that I respect compare last year's Georgia team to maybe the first iteration of the dominant Alabama teams, because they weren't doing it with throwing the ball 450 yards a game. They weren't trying to run 92 plays. You would look at it and think, like, they don't have a Heisman guy at quarterback necessarily. The offense doesn't look like it's completely invincible. But then they sit on you, and they still won 37-0. And the Georgia team last year, even though they had the capacity to still score 45 points, in part because they could start at their own 48-yard line on every single drive, the offense on paper did not scare people the way that maybe modern Alabama does, or Ohio State does sometimes, right? And they still crushed everybody. And if Georgia ever decides to shift things into that gear, or they can, then it's a new Death Star. Like, that's going to be the new conversation. Not just for this year, where I think they are overwhelmingly the favorite to win this year's 14 playoff field, but potentially moving forward, because this year was supposed to be a rebuilding year for Georgia based on what they were last year. And what they were last year was real damn good.
Yeah, that's the fascinating thing to me, is just like you looked at Georgia, you thought, oh, they lose all these draft picks, especially in defense. Yeah, they might take a half step back and look at them. They're the number 1 team in the rankings. They go undefeated again, looking probably certainly a lot better on offense, but probably more balanced than they ever have these last couple of years, and primed to add to their trophy case as well. But the flip side also is just Alabama. I mean, they were within probably 3/4 of winning that football game, and maybe some injuries certainly to the wide receiving core that probably kind of put one hand behind their back, and it was just a little bit too much there in that 4th quarter in Indianapolis. And you kind of think maybe how the fortunes have changed from that game in particular. Everybody came into the season thinking Alabama was going to be a dominant number 1. They had a Heisman Trophy winner. They had Will Anderson, probably the best defensive player in all of college football, and they end up losing 2 games and getting relegated a little bit to the Sugar Bowl against Kansas State. So nobody really expected that for Alabama, as almost as equally as much as they didn't expect Georgia to be this good. So kind of reinforces that in this day and age, it really can be a little bit of a year-to-year type of league for college football, just given the amount of roster turnover, and just how they develop guys in some of these SEC programs like they have there in Athens and Tuscaloosa.
The last story, which is not nearly as significant for the college athletic industry as a whole, but is very significant in our little corner of the internet, is that, of course, EA Sports College Football will not be released in 2023, but is now scheduled to be released in 2024. And given that I make 20% of my subscriptions through covering this game, and broke that story near the end, that was easily the one of the biggest days in Extra Points this year. But that will be a licensing story. It means we get a whole other year of development blogs, and hopefully we're able to go down to Florida and talk to some folks on the development of that project. But in our little part of the world, and certainly I think heading into this offseason, it's a big deal. But Brian, I think we talked enough about the year that already happened. And we got a couple of things right, but I missed some pretty big things. I think we owe it to the people, at least certainly I owe it to the people, to make some dumb predictions about next year. Would you care to join me?
Absolutely. I have a few of my own, so I'm excited to get started here.
Real quick before we do that, though, I predict that you will enjoy getting some new clothes from our sponsors at homefieldapparel.com. They sell extremely comfortable things in 2022, and they're going to drop even more extremely comfortable, interesting things in 2023. They are the most comfortable, most interesting, unique, officially licensed collegiate apparel company. All the designs are old-timey and retro, covering the biggest brands, your Ohio States, your Alabamas, your USCs, to the Colorado School of Mines and DePaul and Chicago State and Fairfield, and a slew of other smaller institutions. I am wearing the Doggers again right now. They are exceptionally comfortable. It's a little bit cold here in my basement office. I'm wearing a crew neck, one that the good folks at BYU Sports Nation sent me recently. Thank you, gentlemen. It's very comfortable. But underneath that is a home field t-shirt.
Well, speaking of Colorado School of Mines, the Division II runner-ups this year.
Yeah. There we go. There's Blaster. You'll get him next year. Ferris State surely is going to be graduating some people in Mines. You got them right where you want them. You can grab your own home field stuff if you didn't get it for Christmas, and you suddenly have some gift cards or some money to burn that you want, so you can get the apparel that you really want. Go to homefieldapparel.com and use promo code EXTRAPOINTS to save 15% off of your order. That is homefieldapparel.com. Well, Brian, what do you say we take a stab at a couple of predictions for this coming year, for 2023? I've got this broken up here in a couple of different categories because there's a few major storylines we expect in the industry. Let's start here with something that I know my non-industry degenerate listeners are going to be most interested in. Let's talk about conference realignment. Where do you think that we're going in this year? I assume that we're going to see at least one conference change announced in 2023, right? Where do you think this is going?
Well, I mean, we'll have the official ones of all the new members joining the league for 2023. You know, the AAC is changing composition. We have the Big 12, those new members integrating. I think Gonzaga is certainly on the move, and I know all the chatter is about the Big 12. I think they're going to the Pac-12. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that they stick with geography. They are one of the members that the Pac-12 adds once they get their new media deals. I think everybody has pegged San Diego State, just given proximity, being in Southern California. It makes a whole lot of sense. Part of the UC system. Yes, that would definitely be the easy pick. But I think George Kliavkoff is going to get one over on his new buddy there in Brett Yormark in the Big 12, who's been talking a big game. And I think they land Gonzaga.
You know, it's funny. I agree. Like, I will say this. I feel substantially more confident that Gonzaga is leaving the West Coast Conference than I do in Gonzaga's destination. I feel pretty confident they're not going to join the Big East, even though the Big East would love for that to happen. And there's some urgency on their front. We can talk about them in a second. I think I would handicap it as like 65% Pac-12, 35% Big 12. And I think I would go with the Pac-12 here as well. And I would also say that I think San Diego State eventually ends up joining the Pac-12, even though the possibility of them going to the Big 12 is not zero. Like, they're in a position there to have some flexibility. I know the Big 12 has stated they want to be a 4 time zone conference. Gun to my head right this second, and this is a guess. This is not reported. A guess. I don't think they get there in 2023. I think it would be. I do feel confident they're not going to poach anybody from the Pac-12, unless Oregon and Washington leave for the Big Ten. And spoiler, my prediction is that doesn't happen in 2023. I think on the realignment front, I think the Pac-12 gets a media deal, and I think they get a grant of rights that is not exorbitantly long, but that those teams make a commitment to stick together for the short term, and that the Big Ten's not really ready to absorb them, or that the math doesn't make sense. The political situation is too volatile to roll the dice on that particular move here right now. So they end up staying together. The Big 12 is unable to poach any of those teams. And then rather than elevating another marginal brand in the Central or Eastern time zone, a Memphis, a South Florida, or a Boise State, which is not a marginal program, but like one that doesn't really satisfy the Big 12's major revenue goals, I think they stand pat. That would be the represent the majority of what realignment looks like there. The one thing I don't actually know about that really have a good sense of this is what the Mountain West would do without San Diego State. And my my initial guess I think is nothing, rather than because there's not really a single FCS team that would be, I think, prepared to make that jump without some kind of travel partner. And adding 2 or 3 or 4 to the Mountain West, I don't think makes immediate financial sense. So even though you're going to lose a little bit of that television deal, my best guess right now, haven't done the reporting on it yet, guess is San Diego State leaves and they don't do anything. And they just roll with a smaller league and have one less mouth to feed and try to elevate what UNLV and Nevada and Colorado State are capable of being.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of the WCC connection, I mean, Gloria Navarro is taking over the league for Craig Thompson. That's going to be a new thing, being in 2023. I would say outside of San Diego State, potentially going for the Pac-12. I think I would keep an eye on Boise State. Not sure if it will happen to join the Big 12. I think that could be another move that is at least percolating a little bit in the background, especially given if there's any kind of instability there around the Mountain West. As you mentioned, there's not really a perfect candidate to either replace San Diego State or really kind of enlarge that league. I think their media rights deals are coming up, not immediately, but kind of sooner than probably expect it. So keep that in mind, that those tend to drive some of these conversations as well. And frankly, there's going to be some of those second order effects still from either Texas and Oklahoma leaving early. I think that deal is going to get announced, probably at the start of the new year. I think that had been in the works for a while. I know that the chatter had picked up a little bit while we were out there in Las Vegas for the SBJ conference, but things were trending that way. I think for a long time before that, and it just makes a lot of sense. You have a new college football playoff coming in 2024. You obviously have USC and UCLA, some new media deals with the SEC. It just kind of makes sense for everybody. Obviously, there are some inventory considerations that certain companies would like if they want to allow Texas and Oklahoma to leave, because those are some pretty big marquee games. Plus, I think for Texas and Oklahoma, they want some clarity in terms of the amount they're actually going to have to pay. So there'll be some negotiation going on with those, and frankly, for a lot of those schools too, that are still those 8 remaining schools in the Big 12. They would like maybe a $5-10 million extra bonus check as well on top of some of their new deals that they've added.
I'm trying to think here of I could step out on a limb a little bit for some other realignment predictions. One that I feel pretty confident in right now is Lemoyne, Division II school in Syracuse, is going to move up to Division I. I think right now the NEC is more likely than the MAC, but it's pretty close on that front. Also on the Division II side, I would say do not discount the possibility of other teams in the Southeast ultimately making the decision to move up. I would watch West Georgia again. I would watch Tampa. Former Division I football program, Tampa. Obviously, they don't have a football team anymore. Well-regarded college basketball program. Would not be shocked. I'm not saying that's imminent. Just saying like those are conversations that are possible. If you want me to call a shot, that's a little bit radical here. If we want to have some fun for prediction, I think the WAC is going to fall apart near the end of 2023.
I think that would dive in a little bit into my prediction that I'll follow up is there going to be at least one league that goes bust or a merger. I think we could get a merger at both the Division I level and the Division II level. I think I recently read that Division III league is merging with another. So I think that's sort of outside the box concept a little bit in terms of, hey, we're struggling to get an AQ bid. That sort of thing. I think that will pick up steam, especially after we get some of the clarity around the NCAA Transformation Committee changes.
Yeah, I mean that's already happening at the FCS football level. Like the OVC and like the Big South, I think is essentially
they have an alliance, but
the WAC, and
you start to see something actually more formal that you're saying, and I think that dives into what you're saying about the WAC.
Yeah, I mean, generally leagues are very hard to kill. What was the last one that died? Was like the Great West.
I mean, the Southwest Conference was probably the biggest league that actually died.
Actually died, right? And then so they're hard to start completely. I think the Mountain West was the last one that was started completely out of whole cloth. People are loath to give up auto bids, and they're loath to create other auto bids. The WAC has been unable to attract new members that fit their established criteria. Part of that's because of geography. Part of that is because they don't want any other reclassifying members. It's not exactly a state secret that many of their schools right now are looking at FBS. Even this WAC ASUN FBS plan. My guess here is that does not actually happen, at least the way as currently constructed. But I understand why they're doing it. Gonzaga leaves. It's going to leave some openings in the West Coast Conference. Stick with me here. Let's say Grand Canyon and Cal Baptist take those two things. Very possible. There have, the temperature has been taken on both of those institutions within that league, within the WCC. I think that point would be the straw that kind of breaks that back then. And Southland has reached out to a couple of those institutions. The ASUN has reached out to a couple of those institutions, and that I think would be the catalyst to force some kind of merger and have that whole thing fall apart. I'm not rooting for that. I'm not, but if you asked me to make a more complicated, less obvious prediction, I think, by this time next year, that league is going to be staring down the barrel of some kind of dissolution, and their teams kind of going between 3 or 4 other different leagues.
And I think part of it would probably be even tied to the college football playoff expansion. And, I know there's been talk about maybe moving up to the FBS. And I think ultimately once that door maybe gets slammed shut in terms of, no, you're not going to get a slice of this pie, at least not right now, until you can kind of not only move up formally or kind of make sure that all those T's are crossed and those I's are dotted in terms of making sure all those programs are good to go at the FBS level. I think that might be ultimately what ends up happening is once they get clarity on that, that could start kind of the ball rolling downhill.
Are we forgetting any other potential realignment predictions? I feel like that's all the ones I'm comfortable like throwing a dart at now, because
I'll second your Grand Canyon one for sure. I think that one it does feel like we're advancing. Although the searching for a new commissioner, maybe the WCC presidents kind of want that to get that process out of the way before going through that. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, at least in terms of an actual realignment prediction. We could probably get into the media rights game. I know there are a couple of those that we could probably dive into as well that are kind of tangentially related to conference realignment, given that is a primary focus of a lot of those media partners.
Yeah, let's talk about that next then. So if I am recalling this correctly, there's 2 big media properties that are going to have new deals announced in 2023. One is the Pac-12, and one is the college football playoff for however that ends up looking post 2026. We expect that to be done this year. For the Pac-12, I will predict that the deal is primarily with ESPN and with Amazon, with Fox capturing a very small basketball only package. I'm thinking less than 16 games to give them a little bit of late night inventory for the regular season. The full postseason tournaments and everything are going to be captured in those 2 things. It's not going to go 100% streaming, but that's going to be the bulk of where a lot of that inventory goes. And it does end up being on a per school basis, in the low 40s, a little bit more in the Big 12, but also sacrificing a not insignificant amount of linear exposure. We can argue about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing or not. The PP measuring contest between those 2 conferences and their associated media arms will continue, I'm sure, in 2023. But that's how I see this being resolved. I don't think it's going to go 100% on Amazon. I don't think Turner or the Discovery or Apple or anybody else gets meaningfully involved. I think that's what it looks like. Gets wrapped up sometime in early February.
I will kind of dovetail a little bit off of that. I do think that ESPN and Amazon are kind of the 2 primary partners that everybody sees the Pac-12 going with. I think there will be a carve out for Fox, not just in basketball. I think there might be a primetime football game component as well, at least just a very small package of games, especially given they do like those primetime windows out west that they can fill. They're really not options. I think the Pac-12 can offer that up to, I know there's been talk about CBS potentially, making it a full day of programming across CBS and involving the Pac-12. I think that ultimately is a package that does end up with Fox, no inside knowledge or have not talked with anybody there about that. But I think that is a bit of an inkling that I'm getting on this one. I do think the Amazon component is interesting. I think there will be certain moves in terms of the Pac-12 networks being spun down formally going forward as
Yeah.
announcement. I think part of that will be Amazon acquiring or however you want to kind of term it, some of those assets. Not just the linear channels themselves, but really making a play for some of that production tech, some of the producers, that sort of thing that they need to not only produce a lot of the Pac-12 content that will soon be on Amazon Prime, but also helping them out across kind of their wide swath of sports that they are adding to their portfolio. So very complicated deal. I think you're right in terms of saying it will be valued at essentially more than what the Big 12, probably $5 to $7 million a year more would be my guess if I had to kind of throw one out there. And a lot of it comes down to, you're selling tangible assets in terms of some of those Pac-12 network items and stuff that you're putting on that, really the Big 12 did not kind of have to sell outside of those third tier games that they are now putting on ESPN Plus. So I would kind of throw that out there. I just think it's going to be very interesting to see kind of the positioning in the market, and it's going to be a little bit more complicated to really just say, hey, they're making X number of dollars more than Big 12 schools. I think that more than anything is one thing I will predict. People are going to read this Pac-12 deal wrong because the Pac-12 has different assets that they can sell that the Big 12 cannot because they were extending their current deal. So sponsorships, marketing, that sort of thing. I think the Pac-12 can do some more stuff around the margins, really to even zoom past the Big 12 in those areas.
I mean, people have been reading these deals wrong ever since these deals have come out at all. You are exactly right. It's not an apples to apples kind of thing, but of course, everyone's going to try to spin it so the top line number is bigger. I have to be honest with you. I don't have a read one way or another at all about the college football playoff TV deal. I feel confident that it's going to be split between multiple networks. Seems to me the question isn't so much will it be ESPN and Fox, but whether it'll be ESPN, Fox, and somebody else. And that I just don't know enough to offer any kind of prediction. I assume you might.
I will say that obviously the next 2 years, it's very different in terms of when they can actually go to the market. I think you will start to have some of those early conversations saying that, hey, we are fully taking it over into the market for that kind of year 13 and starting a fresh new television contract, where you can get multiple bidders, where you can get Warner Brothers Discovery involved, when you can get, CBS, NBC, everybody kind of at the table to kind of discuss some of these packages. I think ultimately this is an ESPN decision. I think they will sub-license out at least 2 games per round for those early rounds, but keep essentially what we have now, the semifinals and the championship game, on ESPN. I think there will be some discussions around maybe putting the title game on ABC and see if they can do that within the current confines of this contract. But I think more than anything, this is more of a jockeying for a lot of these networks to say, hey, here's what we're going to kind of provide in terms of scheduling. Maybe it's a combination of things to where you can work with an ESPN, where you can work with a Fox, where you can work with the CBS, knowing that they are also television partners with the NFL, and maybe there can be some alignment there. Especially if you're talking about some of those Saturday games that these games are going to go up against. If they're on the NFL network, you can maybe start to see, hey, even though we don't want to necessarily compete head to head with some of those NFL games, if we're CBS, if we're Fox, ESPN, whoever it might be, you can also make some headway there, knowing that just the limited reach compared to some of your other cable channels there.
I recognize that we're getting a little bit long, but I mean, hey, you're only getting one, this week. You might have some holiday driving to do here. There's one prediction place that I actually do want to kind of step out here and call a shot, because I think this is going to be one of the absolute biggest stories for next year. And it's one that I do not believe our industry fully appreciates how big of a deal this is, right? In 2023, we are likely to get an initial resolution of NCAA v. Johnson. This is the federal court case right now that at the core is trying to answer whether college football players should be considered employees. It will probably not reach a final resolution in 2023 because it will almost assuredly be appealed, and we don't know how high that appeal will go. I'm calling it here. I think the NCAA is going to lose. I think that court, but buttressed in part by Alston, which is not exactly the same legal question, but one where that opinion is going to be cited, and with an increased skepticism of leeway the NCAA has previously gotten about amateurism, I think they're going to find in favor of the athletes. The other thing that's going to happen in 2023 is that the National Labor Relations Board is going to begin to have hearings about whether athletes should be considered employees, not just at USC, but of the totality. That is also not likely to be completely resolved in 2023. There'll be initial hearings. There's going to be an appeal. We'll see where those appeals go. I think at least one of those will find in favor of the athletes. That doesn't mean that I think amateurism will be formally die in 2023. I probably won't, but it could formally die in 2024, depending on what happens here. And I mention this because I think it's important for everybody to grapple, one, with the very real possibility that the administrative court system or the federal court system blows a hole in the last vestige of the previous system, but also that needs to change. That's going to change how Congress thinks about this. Congress did not pass an NIL bill or get especially close to passing an NIL bill, in part because most senators do not give a shit about college sports. And the crisis that the NCAA was trying to pitch here was essentially there's going to be a bunch of recruiting chaos, and nobody really cared. And that wasn't enough of a crisis. What's going to be able to happen, and this is not me endorsing this argument, this is just me telling you what I think is going to happen, is Charlie Baker and a new lobbying team is going to get in front of the senators in next year and say, listen, the game's changed. The court between this court case and other ones that are coming after it in the NLRB, if the people in the U.S. Congress do nothing, college sports as we know it right now will end in a year and a half, and they will be made employees, and that will be on your watch, unless you provide an antitrust exemption, unless you legislatively codify something resembling the status quo, unless we're able to reach some kind of a negotiation to head this off. That is what's going to happen. And we're looking at a Senate here where, sure, Democrats nominally control the Senate. Republicans barely control the U.S. House. There are several Democratic senators right now that are going to be having to take some really tough votes in places like Michigan, places like Montana, places like Ohio. And I can see a world where people like Sherrod Brown and Debbie Stabenow and Tester realize, hey, I don't want anybody to cut an ad and blame me for ending college sports. That the professionalization of college sports is part of a liberal activist overreach here, and that's why people in these states should vote for conservatives or something, and that they're going to try to strike some sort of deal. So I say all this to say, I think we should grapple with absolutely a non-zero possibility that the political realities around college sports reform change in Washington, D.C. The NCAA is counting on it. I don't think it's going to be a skinny antitrust exemption. I think anything that the NCAA gets from legal relief is going to be tied to healthcare or tied to spending control in other places. But this is a real possibility I think people should grapple with, and it's going to be a major force. And if it fails, which it might, if it fails, this industry needs to be prepared for the fact that the NIL industry as we know it will cease to exist in 2 years. Because your boss can tell you how you do an endorsement deal. They can't do it right now. That's anti-competitive. You're not an employee. You can't meaningfully regulate this world. Even if there's not a collective bargaining agreement, if you're signing an employment contract, that does change things. So I don't think I would want to be somebody whose mortgage depended on supporting NIL collectives, because what happened during National Signing Day today is absolutely no guarantee of what will happen National Signing Day 2 years from now.
I would definitely agree with that sentiment. I think it does kind of stem. You go back to certainly looking at January. I think everybody's going to be very disappointed coming out of the NCAA Transformation Committee and what they are ultimately going to present to the board.
It's going to be real skinny.
So I think after we get past that, and after we get past we digest some of the minor changes, I guess you could say, to how sport committees operate and kind of oversight. Yeah, maybe the NCAA becomes a little more nimble to react to some changes regarding certain sports. Totally understand that. That's fine. I think once we get past that, all the attention is going to be turned to that NLRB case, to the House case, to the Johnson case. And that really is going to soak up probably all our summer, a lot of the spring, a lot of the fall, like that the discussions around those legal issues are going to dominate, I think, the airwaves, not realignment, not necessarily media rights, although there will be a big flourish there around the Pac-12's deal. But I think just the focus on those kind of impending bombs that are headed towards, NCAA athletics, that is ultimately what is going to drive the discourse in 2023, and something we'll probably be talking quite a bit about, whether it's spring meetings, whether it's once we get to NACTA again, and talking to athletic directors. How are you planning for this? And that we're going to be asking a lot of those questions, because frankly, they're already being asked now on campus, amongst presidents, amongst general counsel offices, amongst conferences. But it's going to be jumped to a whole different level, I think, in 2023. And related to that, there are a whole host of issues. But you mentioned Congress. I don't think there will be an antitrust exemption. I think there will be talks of maybe there's some specific bills targeted to allowing certain things, or restricting certain things. I don't think there will be a full antitrust exemption at this point. I probably unwieldy to kind of even expect that, as you mentioned, given the political nature of things. But maybe there's at least talk in Congress. Maybe we'll have some more hearings. Maybe we'll get to the stage where maybe we're at the end of the year, we are kind of debating a certain sort of bill. But this seems like something that the courts are going to be driving first and foremost, and then everybody else is going to be reacting. New president or not, this is going to be a lot of defense being played come 2023 by a lot of administrators across the country.
If you are listening to this and you have not begun to think about what is the 30, 60, and 90 days of your department look like in a world where college athletes are now, or at least some of them are considered to be employees, you better do that. Like, that is not a blue sky thinking hypothetical exercise. Like, that needs to be a binder somewhere, I think, in every Division I department. And I couldn't right now, this late in the year, I couldn't begin to tell you exactly what that's going to look like or how everyone's going to react. But this is a drum I'm going to be banging a lot this year. The time to talk about this in earnest, and not just, well, it's very complicated, we'll have to see, and then kind of punt, like, no, we got to do this now, because the time for abstract hypotheticals was 3 years ago. We are now on the door, and unless you are so confident that you will be able to beat both the NLRB, Johnson, and future follow-up litigation to preserve this model, which, by the way, works pretty stupidly, given the last couple of days here with NIL and recruiting. You have to grapple with this world. Is there anything else? I think that we want to mistakenly call our shots here before we let people go.
Well, we'll have some big changes, I guess, to across the D1 ticker empire. I'll make that prediction right now. In terms of obviously the newsletter, extra points, we'll have some changes to going for 2. I know everybody's concerned when we say changes, but they'll be positive. Trust me when I say that.
Yeah.
A whole host of things. Still doing HeadCoachU. Got a couple things on the hopper on that front. So a lot of great stuff. We'll be at the NC convention to start the year. Right after the national title game. So a lot going on in right at the beginning of 2023. But we will certainly be staying busy and having plenty to talk about here on this podcast and on plenty of other platforms.
Yeah, I think real quick, I think I can talk a little bit about that for 2023. 2022 was, for Extra Points, a successful year, but it was a successful year that brought some big questions, I think. And I wrote a lot about those. I am personally really worried about Twitter. And it's not a political thing so much here as it is. Twitter is a major source of our audience referrals, and I don't think I can depend on that company just because it's so sporadic, that we have to build other audience referral systems. Like, if you enjoy Extra Points, like, this is my personal plea to you, please help other people be aware of it. Please share it with your friends. Share this podcast with them, your colleagues, your message boards, your subreddits. It's really important. That's a business critical thing. We are probably going to leave Ghost and move to Beehive, move to a different newsletter service in late January. Like, I'm spending some time working on the back end there. We are going to make some changes with this podcast. I don't want to speculate on those because we haven't totally nailed them down yet, but there are going to be some changes for going for 2. And the hope is to build the newsletter into something that is more sustainable but still a high quality level. Guys, I mean, like, I wrote two books worth of newsletters this year, And like, I'm trying to write a second actual book and trying to do more actual reporting and trying to do other things. And so we have to move things around to make that possible and make it possible for us to hit the road, right? I think some of the best things that we did, or when we go to conferences and get to interview people in person, and that builds a source network for us throughout the year. I'm really proud of the work that we did in Montana and at Grand Canyon, where we went to this year, and on a little tour of Connecticut and Fairfield. Like, people responded to those. That takes money. That takes time. And that's where we have to make some changes to make sure that we have the resources capable of doing that. I'm not quitting. I don't anticipate quitting in 2023. I don't think I'll be doing Extra Points for another decade, but like, I am excited about what next year will bring for all of us. And man, we talked for an hour. I didn't even talk about D1 Classroom, which is a big deal. It's going to serve over 1,000 students again this semester, and potentially, closer to 2 by the end of the year, which is something that I think even listeners to the show will begin to see some benefits from moving forward. So, friends, it's been fun. I can't wait to do this again in 11 months and laugh at what we screwed up when Baylor is suddenly in the ACC and Ohio State has become an independent, and Ryan Day is coaching the Chicago Bears. Friends, you can, of course, follow me on Twitter at MattBrownEP. He's at Bryan D. Fischer. We're all over Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Have a lovely and safe new year. And we'll catch up with you again in 2023.